The United Nations General Assembly is getting started. Yes, finally. And not only that, the UN per se is turning 80 years old. 80 years old if it was a human being, of course, but since in an intergovernmental organization, we won't be celebrating the anniversary as another human being. But jokes aside, this is a turning moment. Humanity has so many challenges, and really the United Nations General Assembly has started already with 4 of them: the SDGs, gender equality, NATO and its airspace, and the Palestinian and Israeli conflict. We'll go through them, we'll see what's happening right now in the UN General Assembly in New York, and also what are the main takeaways that we can have from these 4 main topics, and especially what are the potential next topics that we'll be having in the coming days in the UN. As again, the UN General Assembly will last for a whole week, where leaders from all over the world, especially heads of state, but also presidents, even kings, and other media personalities will attend there. And it's extremely relevant because one might see it from an external point of view, and you could argue that, for example, it's only talk and that's pretty much it. But it's actually a place where many leaders meet each other that usually they wouldn't talk to each other because they have many different perspectives, not to say even they are in certain or extreme conflicts. And it's an atypical situation because it's that place once per year, or in some cases such as Donald Trump, maybe 5 times per year, they appear there and they have the chance to talk to each other. And you could counter-argue again that talking is not enough and we need actions, which is completely true. But remember that 80 years ago, that's why we're celebrating the anniversary, even though it's not a human being. 80 years ago, this didn't happen. We were still in the Second World War. And if you go back to history, the normal state of humanity was to conquer each other, or at the very least not to speak to each other, not having some common rules, not being a single civilization, which is the case now. So that's why I want to celebrate the UN80 anniversary, because it's a place where leaders can talk to each other, and it's still a multilateral diplomatic institution that could be even more useful, which is true, but it has done so many things in the past and can still deliver in the present and in the future. So let's have hope and optimism in that regard. But having said that, let's get it started with the first moment, the SDG moment. The Sustainable Development Goals is the agenda that was implemented around 10 years ago, and it's a special moment because we're above the threshold in the equator, so which basically means that we have already surpassed half of the agenda of the SDGs, and it's a very, very special moment. Of course, the transition from the Millennium Goals to the SDGs was quite a milestone as well, because it was fully understood as development in a multidimensional way, including climate change, eradicating poverty, also gender equality, and so on. But the SDGs are quite a different thing, that currently some of them we're achieving them, some others are on track, but most of them are off track, which basically means that we're not achieving our proposed targets. And some of them are not only off track, but we're going towards a state that is a more negative one than when we started. So that's a pretty negative trend. But still, it's very important to remind ourselves that the SDGs are like a pathway to follow. It's a framework, a global framework that humanity should follow so that we can live in a more prosperous world. Then we have the second item of the agenda in this first day of the UN General Assembly, which is gender equality. It's been also 30 years since the Beijing Convention, and this is a huge celebration as well, because the Beijing Convention was the biggest and first convention that they tried to gain momentum when it comes to women's rights. So we have quite improved in that metric, in that indicator, but we still are not on track to accomplish gender parity. Actually, if we follow the same metric, the same trend, we might accomplish it in 100, 130 years. So it's completely off track, and we need to remind ourselves that it's not only a moral issue, but also a practical one. Because in the end, we need half of the humanity, which are women, also to have the same opportunities than men, so that the world can be a more prosperous one. But especially from the moral perspective, to having equal opportunities for women as well. And we're talking here, for example, in certain countries or regions, women cannot freely access to secondary education, or that culturally speaking, women are thought to be in charge of, for example, having children or many housework that is not paid, and that where many times the inequality in the access in the workplace still remains. Obviously, there are many challenges. These are some of them, and we need to remind ourselves that this is a moral but also a rational issue to be solved as soon as possible. Then we have obviously the Israeli and Palestinian conflict, and here will be extremely difficult to solve the issue, but still the political will is there, and we're seeing in the General Assembly that many countries, including the UK, Australia, Canada, France, Saudi Arabia, among many others, are already recognizing the Palestine Authority as a nation state. And this is great news, but at the same time, we need all actors, including obviously the current actor that is governing Gaza, which is Hamas, to release all hostages, which is something that hasn't done, and also to be released from power, as the terror attacks that happened in October 2023 are not justifiable at all. But same as I condemn the attacks of Hamas, it's also very clear that what Israel is pursuing could potentially be a genocide, but at the very least is a catastrophe unfolding in Gaza. That's why we need a two-state solution, as Jerusalem is Jerusalem as a capital for both states, Palestine being an independent state, and obviously Israel needs to stop and has to agree of an immediate and long-lasting ceasefire, and also obviously releasing the obstacles and the blockade of aid, as humanitarian aid needs to enter the country. So many countries will try to push this agenda, but the solution seems to be extremely difficult as of today, but we hope that in the United Nations General Assembly momentum can be increased. And lastly, we have another issue, which is basically that it's not surprising, but this could trigger a third world war potentially, that the sovereignty of Estonia has been breached some days ago, as the airspace was invaded for some minutes by Russian air jets or whatever might be the semantics, right? So this is critical that borders are respected. In this case, that NATO countries are fully aligned and do not take decisions by themselves. Obviously, the blame is on Russia and the Russian Federation for provoking, because this in the end, theoretically, or most likely at very least, the Russian Federation will not invade the country, because that would literally mean third world war. But still, it needs to stop provoking NATO countries, and NATO countries need to fully align and be a very strong alliance, and also coordinating with other actors, including the US, and not taking unilateral decisions. So obviously the US is part of NATO, but as you might know, there are some differences between European countries and NATO, and partially NATO and US. So they need to be as coordinated as ever before because the situation is very tense and it was discussed in the United Nations Security Council. So basically, these are the four fronts of the first day of the United Nations General Assembly, which pretty intense, to be honest. We could also talk about Sudan, Ukraine, and many other topics, but these were the four most relevant in one day. Who knows what comes next? The world really seems to increase entropy every single day, so every day is more complex and more chaotic, but still we need to remain optimistic because as we commemorate the anniversary of the UN of already 80 years, we need to see that this pathway, it was the sum of the decisions we took as humanity, and we decided to go for peace. But this can be also reversed. So let's be a practical optimism, because in the end, humanity, yes, can choose peace, but we need to make sure that that remains and we don't have to take it for granted. Because as we've seen in the past and also the present, peace and all the efforts we've carried out as humanity can be taken down in any second, but we can also recover from them pretty quickly. So I think that with this we can end the video of today, and we hope that United Nations General Assembly remains a safe space for dialogue, and especially to work on those decisions that will make the world a better place. So if you like this content, consider subscribing to the channel, and as always, enjoy life, embrace your curiosity, and be the change you want to see in the world. See you in the next optimistic adventure.